Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all our participants wherever you are from the global family. Yes, thank you very much to the organizers, excuse me, and also to ICRISAT for the invitation to participate in this meeting. I will quickly move through. We're talking about food and agriculture and policies, and the previous speakers, I think, have laid a groundwork for my presentation. It's almost as if we talked and sort of reorganized how this is going to go. My first point is that our food and agriculture systems have basically failed to deliver on, in a lot of cases, on all the pillars of food and nutrition security, issues of availability, accessibility, utilization, and also the stability of food security. Accessibility, particularly, you'd recall a couple of months ago when the State of Food and Nutrition, Global Food and Nutrition Report was released. One of the things that came through was that it was very difficult to access a balanced diet. You may know what to do, but it's actually costs a lot more to eat well, which is really a difficult thing to take. The policies that influence food systems, obviously they need to appreciate the complexity of food systems. We're talking from growing primary production all the way to disposal of food and food-related items. There's a whole chain there. Everybody's been talking about the value chain approach, yes, but the food system is actually things that are related to agriculture directly, but you also have other players who have a role to play who are not normally considered as agriculture or food when, in our thinking, but we need to take those on board and appreciate that complexity. And we also want to see that the food systems are nutrition sensitive to address the immediate, underlying, and basic causes of malnutrition. And agriculture is but one component of the food system which should help deliver healthy diets. So moving on, however, we need to address the disconnect in policies between agriculture, particularly with nutrition. Food and nutrition security are much more than providing adequate calories, which has been the preoccupation of most African governments, that when they talk about food security, they're literally talking about calories coming from the major staples, especially maize. We just heard about the challenges of producing maize, but also traditionally agriculture has tended to focus on increasing production and incomes and assume that nutrition will take care of itself. And we've seen that yields across Africa have increased markedly, but malnutrition is still persistent. As the moderator said, where are we missing it? And also the agriculture and nutrition practitioners, they need to work together to create food systems that ensure year-round access to safe, affordable, and nutritious foods. And also to prioritize production of nutri-staples. These are things like sorghums and millets, because we know that 70% of our diets are made up of cereals. So it makes a lot of sense to make sure that those cereals are fortified, they contain the right amount of nutrients. So, and in addition to that, we also need to focus on other nutrient-dense foods, things like your animal source foods, fruits, and vegetables, which would try to make sure that these are affordable, particularly to low-income consumers. Now, when you look at the frameworks, we need to make sure that the policies are aligned to global and regional frameworks. We're all aware of the SDG 2 and also other sustainable development goals, which are very much closely related to food policies and strategies. In fact, you could say all the 17 SDGs have something to do with agriculture and food if you look at the relationships. But for Africa, we also have the Vision 2063, which as one of its aspirations is to have a healthy and well-nourished citizenry. And then of course we have the Malabo declarations and commitments, which are even more ambitious than the SDGs. And Africa, of course, is always ambitious, setting real ambitious goals. We actually gave ourselves up to 2025 as opposed to 2030 for the global agenda. Then we also have regional strategies which are crafted by the regional economic communities. And we already had some examples of that from the earlier speakers. But I'm more interested in just spending a bit more time on the Malabo CCADP commitments that the heads of state committed to in 2014. Note that this was a year before 2015 when the SDGs came into being. So Africa was already ahead of the global community here. So we saw a recommitment to CCADP processes which would ensure at least 6% of growth in agriculture, enhancing investment in agriculture by making sure that governments allocated minimum 10% of their national budgets to agriculture because of its importance. And then, of course, with ending hunger, halving poverty, and also boosting or tripling inter-Africa trade in agricultural commodities, enhancing resilience to climate change and other shocks. Of course, other shocks with COVID-19 as an example, and also strengthening mutual accountability to actions and results. This is in response to the last question which was asked, where are we missing it? And Dr. Tobias gave some examples, and one of the things he picked up was consistency or lack of it in policies, and also capacity for implementation. But of course, accountability is part of that. So the policies obviously are implemented through strategies which should focus on climate smart, nutrition specific, as well as nutrition sensitive interventions. So this is a multi-sectoral sort of agenda. Even if we're talking about food and agriculture, when it comes to food and nutrition security, we have to go well beyond the traditional players and actors. So issues of food security, both at national and household level, productivity has been mentioned, and also focus on economic, social, and environmental factors affecting access, the whole ecosystem and livelihoods for incomes. And of course, we know that we're talking about smart foods. So these are foods that are obviously good for us, so the individual, but also good for the planet, which is of course the issues of climate resilience and the environment, but also good for the farmer. The farmers are not going to produce something if their livelihoods actually are not taken care of. This is why it's important that the policy instruments are able to do that. So issues of access, affordability, and also nutrition and health outcomes for children, of course, the vulnerable groups, women and other vulnerable individuals, and issues of dietary intake, food safety, community health. It's not enough to have enough food, but you also need to make sure that we address issues of health, the issues of enteropathy, because we know you can eat good food, but if you're not healthy, the utilization of that food obviously is affected. So let's look at how countries have actually performed on the Malabo commitments. One of the things that the African countries agreed to was to set up an accountability mechanism through the biennial review report of the Malabo commitments, the 7 commitments. How have the countries performed so far? We've had 2 reports so far, one which was in 2017, and the other one up to the 2 years from 2018 to 2019. The first biennial report, 42% of the countries, that is 47 countries that reported, were on target to achieving the commitments by 2025. The recent report, which was released beginning of this year for the period ending 2019, we see a regression that only 8% of the countries were on track. And we can see the details in the areas in which they are failing. The issues of budget allocation, that's not happening. So that's again the consistency and alignment to commitments. It's one thing to make a political pronouncement, it's another thing to put your money where your mouth is. Undernourishment, also a critical thing. Having hunger, we're way below the target to be able to get there. Inter-African trade, that's actually doing much better than most. So we want to commend Africa for that. Resilience to climate variability, very low, and mutual accountability, similarly low. So we can see that on most fronts, we're not doing too well, even if we've got the policies in place. And one of the things we did at FANRPAN recently was working with one of the RECs, SADC, to look at the national food and nutrition strategies and identify gaps in terms of how they are aligned to the regional frameworks. And this slide is just showing some examples. We just took those, the top, if you like, sort of areas where there are gaps and countries are not actually living up to the regional frameworks. Access to land and water. This was mentioned by Tobias as one of the key things, especially for women. Labor-saving technologies and women's free time. The results frameworks, because if you're going to implement something, you need to be able to measure it. And the monitoring and evaluation systems on these food and nutrition strategies very weak. Access to incomes, which is also good for the farmer, income generating activities. A lot of policy or strategies don't seem to cover this very well. Access to markets in terms of improving supply of food to the communities, also weak. Climate change adaptation, youth and women empowerment, and also food safety. So we can see that despite making all these pronouncements, the evidence on the ground is saying something else. We also saw, we looked at 4 countries also so far in the SADC, just looking at their capacity for implementation, and we saw some gaps. One, in coordination structures, because it's multi-sectoral, and also their lack of dedicated staff. You talk food and nutrition security, but ministries and sectors still continue to work on their traditional aspects, and there's really no dedicated structures and staff to push the food and nutrition security agenda. And there are also some sector level technical capacities that are there, one of which is the lack of understanding of the nexus between agriculture, food security, and nutrition among the agriculture staff. You could also say among the health staff. So this cuts across, and systems to collect nutrition data. Data is a major issue that we can be said to be doing well in some areas, but if you are not measuring it, you're not reporting it, then you can't really follow what's going on. So what are the take-home points? Well, countries need to domesticate the global, particularly regional frameworks and commitments to deliver food that is good for consumers, the planet, and the farmers' livelihoods. And also, more importantly, ensure harmonization of food and agriculture policies across sectors, not just in agriculture, but to go across the sectors. As we say, food systems touches virtually all sectors. And really, Africa is not short of policies. We know what needs to be done, but we just need to improve implementation. And of course, the issues about where to invest so that those capacities can be put in place in order to deliver on food and nutrition security. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. For the sake of time, I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sibanda. You have really given us a very good picture on why we are where we are as far as nutrition is concerned. The picture you have presented on the Malabo Declaration, I think it's a grim picture. We are supposed to be going forward, but we are seeing a trend of retrogression in a key in the indicators, one of which is nutrition. So when we look at Malabo, it's literally 5 years away. And then we have the SDG. So where do you think we can really quickly work with the policy makers and different stakeholders to quickly change course? Because retrogression is really not going to take us where we want to be, where the world wants to be in 2030. So where do you think there are the low-hanging fruits that we can use to quickly change course? Over to you.
Okay, I think it's a broad question, but one issue that I see as a key missing link here is just the coordination of the whole effort. We're still working as sectors, working in silos. You have agriculture, you have health, you have people dealing with water and sanitation, doing their own thing. And yet, really, if we're talking food systems, we need a multi-sectoral approach. So one of the things to do is to reorganize the whole architecture of implementation and the structures. You probably need to locate the food and nutrition security and related issues, probably in an office that is oversight on all sectors, and not just put it in health or in agriculture. So you're probably talking of the Prime Minister's office or part of the President's office, so that you can have better coordination, and then have a holistic view of what's happening and allocate resources, accordingly. Because without implementation, we can say all these nice things, but nothing is going to happen. So it's that reorganization, but also making sure that there's the right amount of investment in implementation and the structures that support implementation.
Yeah, thank you very much.